Okay, moving on from the external walls, let's measure the internal walls. Notice that I changed the name of what I had imported originally as Warehouse 5 to now Warehouse 05A, external walls, just to keep a separate copy of that. So what I would have done there is clicked File, click Properties, and change the name there before I export. Now if that's grayed out and you can't change the name, as I said before, you need to click File, you need to go down to, you mightn't see it there, but scroll down a little bit to Options. And once you click Options, then General and this little Rename Buildings needs to be checked. So it means I can change the name of the building and keep different copies. So then if I need to check that box and go back and change the name. Now what I might do here is actually give it another name here. Properties again. Let's call it Warehouse 06B. And then now we're on internal walls. Capital I, internal walls. Click Update. So anything I do now in this particular project, I can do and save it and then export it and then move on from that. So finishing off with external walls, I'm going to create a new dimension group. Actually, before I do that, let's take a look at what is going on with the internal walls. So on the ground floor, looks like we've got a 2 and 5, it says it here, solid block laid on flat. Obviously the same here around the stair core. We got a 100mm thick wall here around the toilet up to the external wall there through the door. On the first floor, we got what they're calling here hollow block wall on the first floor, 2 and 5. And then we've got an internal partition. So looking at that on the section, just to see, click the section, last drawing there. You can see the block laid in its flat. There's a band beam between that internal block wall and what is the first floor here around the stair core. And then we got this hollow core wall, internal 2 and 5 wall with some cavity fill, I suppose concrete, what's been called here U-band around the stair core, all the way up then to the underside of the roof with a block laid on flat and some fireproofing. Okay, and there we see our internal partition up to the underside of the ceiling. So we're going to take it, I suppose, again floor by floor. The reason being is because they're different heights, and again it's good practice to do so. And we can designate the applicable height to each of the floor walls, or each of the walls on the floor. So let's start. Let's click Dimensions. Let's add a dimension group, and it'll default to what I had previously there, and that last dimension was in the folder 21 external walls first floor. So let's change that now to 22 internal walls and ground floor. Let's follow the same methodology like we did before. What do we got? We got 2 and 5mm block work. This time internal and ground floor. Just to keep it separate. Measurement type for the moment, length. I will change it to a default display a wall area and add a height in a few minutes. So click Insert, and that's our first item. And then I'm going to add our next one for the ground floor. And I can see I made a mistake there. I actually called them, that should be internal. There we go. And now we've got 100mm block work. Internal ground floor. So that's what we have on the ground floor. I will have to change the this dimension name or folder name on the other dimension. I'll get to that in a second. Length, let's change the color here to a different color. Again, dark blue. And we'll get to the default display from a wall area perspective in a second. Click Insert. I do have to go back and change this one to its right folder, which was internal walls rather than that little typo. So that'll put them in the same category. So internal walls, ground floor, 2 dimension groups. From a height perspective, let's take a look. Let's click Drawings. Let's click the little icon, ruler icon here up right hand corner. And the height will be from the ground floor up to the underside of that first floor. That's going to be the height of our internal walls. Now, you could logically say, all right, well, it's not quite for these walls, it'll be to the underside of the beam, but let's err on the cautious side and measure through that beam. So we've got from this point up to the underside, it's 2.465. So I'm happy enough with that. I'll go back to about my 2 and 5 blockwork wall, and I'll put in the height of 2.465, and I'll change the default display to wall area. Click Update. Yes, I do want to change all my heights to that and start measuring it. Just yet, but it will. And then do the same here. 2.4, what was it, 65, and change that to wall area. Okay, so happy enough with that. 2 wall areas, even though they're going to be measured as lengths. And let's start measuring. So click ground floor, first floor plans. This is fairly straightforward from a measurement perspective. Start with the 2 and 5. Start on the external wall, inside face of the external wall. So starting here, because I've measured this wall all the way down to here, and then that 100mm wall starts off again. So click that corner and measure to that corner. Click that corner, measure up to where this begins here on the inside face. I might have to zoom in to actually get that, otherwise they'll want to stick to a corner from the hatch there, which is not what I want. So I'll zoom in a little bit further, and then I'm going to zoom in here, click that point all the way across to, I suppose, where I believe this ends. Okay, and then from this point, actually more like from this point to there. Okay, so that should cover me in terms of my 2 and 5 walls at 48 meters squared. As I said, I do have 100mm block walls, but I'm going to do what I did before. Click the ground floor folder, and then drop down a filter and click the 100mm. So now I'm on the 100mm walls, but showing the 2 and 5 just to see where I left off. So click, there's a 100mm wall. I could stop there, but I'm missing that little bit. There we go. So we'll cover that wall there, and then that one down, and that one from there. So I think I'm covered there. So from here to here, from corner to corner on this wall, you'll notice I'm measuring through my opes. I'll deal with the opes in the workbook rather than trying to take them out here on the measurement with a negative dimension. And it's probably easier just to do it in the workbook. So there we go. So that's my 100mm walls. Look at them in 3D just to see. I'm happy enough with that. Now that links up and joins up in terms of my walls. Click 3D again. So that's my ground floor construction. Moving on now to my first floor construction. So I'm going to have to create some dimension groups here again. Dimensions, add dimension group. This time I will also have, I don't have any 100mm walls. I have 215mm hollow core. And they are internal first floor. Okay. So measure the length, put a default height in a few minutes. And that should be okay. Oh, I've got to change my group now from ground to first. So I create a separate group for first floor and click insert. So there that goes in. Happy enough with that. And I've also got the timber frame partitions. I don't have any 100mm internal walls there. So let's do that. Dimensions, add dimension group, and 100mm timber framed partitions. Okay, measurement type length, color, give it a different color. So I differentiate it from what's on that same floor. And click insert. It doesn't really matter what colors you pick. Let's look at heights here. So again, clicking my section. I'm not measuring anything off the section. I'm just measuring my heights so I can utilize them in the dimensions rather than pointing and clicking a particular takeoff here. You'll notice these walls. So that's the spine wall. So let's try and orientate ourselves through here. So that section is through, go back to the ground floor. That section is through here. So go straight through here. You can see it AATO5 or is it AATO6? We'll take a look in a second. But essentially that's the spine wall through the ridge, through the apex of the building. That'll be the tallest. Then this ridge slopes down to the eaves. So we go from a height down to, I suppose, a lesser height at the parapet, because we obviously got a fall for rainfall. And because that fall is sloping down towards the eaves there, it'll go from a height here to a lesser height here, and then this wall will be of the same height across just on the inside of that spine. So let's try and attempt to put some heights to this. Let's start first of all with a default height. We can put anything in. Let's just check our section. Let's start with a default height of, let's say, what's that? 3.938 for one of the walls up to the underside of the roof. Okay? Or just to the underside of where the fireproofing is. So 3.938. Let's double click our first floor and stick it in there. 3.938. Change that to default display wall area. Click yes. From the 100mm timber frame partitions perspective, well, that just goes up to the ceiling. Let's just do a quick little measurement on that. Little measurement rule. Click bottom up to the top, and you can see that's exactly 2.5 to the underside of the ceiling. So let's double click that, and they'll be of all of the same height, so I don't have to worry about different heights there because it's just up to ceiling level, whereas the block walls go all the way up to the roof. 2 point high. Click update. Actually, made a mistake there. Didn't change the default display. So wall area and default height. So happy enough with what's there. Start with the 2 and 5 walls. Actually, I'll start with the 100 timber frame partitions because they're probably easier to measure. Ground floor, first floor plans, and staying on 100mm timber frames. Go from that corner down to there, and go from this side all the way across. Now, as you do this, you start becoming quicker. I can imagine you're thinking to yourself, he's very quick. And I am quick because I've been doing it for many years, and you will develop this speed and get even quicker than me because you'll be probably doing it on a daily basis. So you can see I've measured through my walls. A lot of you weren't doing that in that little exam I gave you at Christmas. But just make sure that when you're measuring walls, be it internal and external walls, you measure through your oaks. Okay, so happy enough with that. 26 meters squared, default height in there 2.5, and it's giving me a wall area. 2 and 5 hollow core, internal floor. Again, fairly straightforward. Click from here to here, one side, and then from that side to right up to that side. And then I've got a few more walls here from here to here, and from there to there. Slightly off here. Go up, grab it, and just drop it up there. So happy enough with that. If I wanted to see them both together, I'm happy enough with them both there. So hollow core floor, these 1, 2, 3, 4 walls have different heights. So let's take a look at them. From a dimensions perspective, let's see all those floor lines or walls together. So I go from dimension groups to dimensions, and there we have one, which is DK003. And you can see I put in a default height of 3.94, so it's shown up there in terms of height. If you don't see height there in terms of a column, you can click the little snowflake and check the box and it'll show up. I don't really need to see zone 1, zone 2, so I'm going to click them off. You can or you don't have to do what I just did there in terms of the zones, but I just want to see what I want to see. I could also click wall area because it's not shown. There we go. There's the wall area. Okay, so I've got quantity, total, UOM, unit of measurement, height, and I want to adjust the heights here. So what do I want to adjust the heights to? All right, let's take a look. I want to click on my section. We have the wall along the apex, that wall there. Let's do a quick little measurement from, let's go from the high side. Why not measure from the underside of the roof, even though it might necessarily be that. 4.220, okay, 4.23 on the high side of that, and let's be cautious and take the high side. In the middle there, I know it's saying 3.938, but let's just double check. Instead of taking it from there, I'm going to take it from there. Again, on the cautious side, 3.976. So that particular wall. And then on the eaves level, I suppose it's it actually should be from here, but I'm going to measure from where I think that sloped is. So measure again, a little bit on the high side. So from that point down to that point, and it's saying it's 3.61, thereabouts. Okay, 3.61. There we go, or 623. Okay, so I have 3 different dimensions there. If I was to relate those dimensions to my plans, so clicking back in my plans, this is the spine wall through the center, the highest wall, and that, what did I say, that's 4.23. This wall here is 4.23 on the top, sloping down to 3.61. So let's just try and remember these figures. And this particular wall here is, what did I say, 3.976, or close to what is 4 meters. Okay, now if I'm to get the height of this wall, it has to be from the low point of 3.976 to a high point of 4.23. So this wall here will be about 4 meters, or just over 4 meters, 4.103 based on my calculations, the average of those 2 points, high and low. And then this last wall here, average of the 2 points, high and low, this point here being 4.23 and this one here being 3.61. Now it would be handy, Costex doesn't do this, but Cupid does, where I can put the point in on the low end, put the point in on the high end, and it'll calculate the area for me. But in Costex, I have to assign a height by getting the average of the 2 points. Okay, so to change the heights from the default height we inserted, the 2 and 5 hollow core wall, to the actual specific heights of each individual line, we need to click on dimensions. And we'll see the lines, 4 lines that we measured. How do you know which line is which? Well, if you click on the first dimension there, you'll see that that's the one through the middle. So let's go ahead and change that dimension to what it should be. If I right click the actual line, or if I double click the line, I can change the dimension, but let me show you the first way first. So right click, change height, it'll come up as 0, but change it to what is that one? That was 3.976, if you can remember from what I called out just a minute ago. So click OK. So that should change that there. The next one was this particular line here, and that went from, well, what was 3.976 up to 2.3. So that average, right click, change height, should be about 4.1. So I think it's 4.103. If I add the 2 dimensions together and divide by 2, that's what I get. So that's that average height. As I said before, Cupid is quite good in this regard because it'll give you a height 1 and a height 2. So you can just insert the 2 different heights and it'll give you the average dimension. The next item is this particular line here that goes from, what did I say, 3.61, the low end at the eaves, up to the ridge at 4.23. So let's change that. Right click. Actually, in fact, you can double click it if you want. Up will come dimension properties of the particular dimension rather than the dimension group. You see here height, it's using the default, but if I uncheck that use default, I can change it. So this is another way of doing it. Let's change it to 3.92. Click update, and that should be in there, 3.92. And then the last one, which was the high one through the ridge, is I double click it again, or right click, change height, use default, 4.23. Click update, and there we have essentially our 4 lines. Look at 3D view and you can see that they're slightly different in terms of height from line to line. Now again, as I said, that's kind of averaging our height in terms of from point to point, so just keep that in mind. Rather than them actually being straight lines, they kind of slope. It's just showing the average heights. And if I go back to my dimension group, that wall area will have changed slightly from whatever it was prior to my adjustment of my height. So that is our internal walls. Let's take a look at them all together. Clicking on the internal walls group, we've got our ground floor internal walls, and we've got our first floor internal walls. First floor and ground floor. Want to see all our walls together? Click external walls, hold down Control, click internal walls. So there's our external and internal walls. Maybe once I've measured them, I'll just do a double check to see that I've everything counted. Might even look at my 3D view just to see how it's all shaping up. Did I cover everything? I'm happy enough I did, and I'm ready to move on. But that is external and internal walls. I've changed the name of a warehouse 05B in this case to internal walls. I'm going to export building to EXF. Which one am I exporting? That one. Select and save it as 05B internal walls. Once I've changed the name, I'm going to save it to my Cosmetics module, and there we go. Click OK. My export is complete. However, my building will still be there. I can continue working on it. It's just that I've saved a copy. Thanks very much, and we'll pick up with another element in our next tutorial.